Whoa, a video that isn't zombies? What year is it again? Oh, right. It's yet another year with a tacked on zombies experience that completely misses what made its predecessor so great. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Get a good old drink before we start this, boys. This is gonna be a long one. Alright, let's go. I fucking love Extinction. I love the cryptids, I love the gameplay, I love the story, I love the classes and how they're balanced. I like the Kraken. No, I don't. Not in the slightest. But for real, I've been wanting to have an excuse to talk about Extinction for quite a while, but just never got around to it in 2014, so I figured my window of opportunity was gone. But then again, my channel isn't exactly about being timely. I mean, I'm still discussing Black Ops 3 weapons, so, you know. So let's discuss the 4-year-old community-derided, if I recall correctly, game mode Extinction. Extinction did not start out on the most solid of ground. The first map featured little to no story, no characters whatsoever, and the gameplay was completely different from zombies. It also didn't help that there was no incentive to play the same map besides leveling up. No alternate game modes, no special rewards for completion, no hardcore mode, nothing. However, that all changed as Extinction season went on. In DLC 1 we were introduced to 3 new characters: Captain David Archer, Dr. Samantha Cross, and General Castle, also known as the black guy that fucks about in space for 3 maps. Cross and Archer also had a plethora of backstory in the form of newly added intel logs that helped flesh them out as people. Take note, Infinite Warfare. Oh wait, you guys made this one? Oh, that's depressing. Later, on April 3rd, 2014, the Armory was added to the game and finally gave us those rewards that we so craved. The Armory allowed players to earn teeth based on their in-game performances and pick the rewards. They started out fairly balanced, with the most overpowered at the time being Hypnoknife or Rhino, but after the release of the Nemesis DLC, the teeth earn rate was buffed and insanely overpowered and costly upgrades were added for the really dedicated players like myself. And I have all of them. And no, we're not done with the greatness. On April 18th, 2014, the aptly named Chaos Mode was added to Extinction and was a nice little way to spice up the game, even if it ultimately wasn't really my cup of tea. And one last post-launch edition, Hardcore Difficulty. Again, it's not for me, but I know that some people love the extra challenge. Well, we've covered the history of the mode, so let's talk about the maps themselves and see if they're nearly as bad as the community made it out to be. They're not. Alright, let's get it out of the way right off the bat. Point of Contact is about as basic and lacking in depth as an on-disc map can get. Oh, for fuck's sake, besides those. It's because of this that a large majority of the player base didn't seem to gravitate towards Extinction and showed a complete ambivalence at best to the following episodes. But is it actually bad, or is it just kinda lacking? Let's discuss. Starting off with good things first, as we do. Point of Contact features an effective, end-of-days kind of vibe. It's very similar to the vibe of some of the campaign missions, and that's a good thing, seeing as the two were originally slated to be in the same universe. There's an overabundance of effective traps and defensive turrets strategically placed around the map, and 2 support helicopter bi-locations that never came back in the DLC maps? Aw. Well, that sucks. And finally, there's a solid variety of weapons, despite the loss of the Honey Badger in a post-launch update. And each weapon fills a unique role. Even the weaker weapons like the CBJ and Bison work well when employed as backup weapons. Sadly though, these weapons are not exactly the most balanced. The AK-12, the M27, and the Vector are far and away the best of their class. But sadly, for everything good about Point of Contact, there's something else lacking. For starters, the barrier hives are supposed to spice up the gameplay a bit, but just come off as trite. Yeah, just shoot this non-threatening bulb until it blows up, and also scorpions. Maybe if they had thrown in some tougher cryptids, the more you damage to the hive, it'd be better. Like, I don't know, have hunters come in on the last third of the first one, and have a rhino or 2 spawn on the second one. I don't know. Secondly, the escape sequence. I actually really like the idea of this sequence, and spoiler alert, this same idea is done masterfully in Awakening. But in Point of Contact, it's handled so poorly. It starts out promising. The music kicks in, cryptids are popping out of the ground everywhere, and there's a fucking helicopter providing close air support as you run. But just as you start to get into it, these fucking meteors come down and block your path in an attempt to make it more intense. But by this time, the music has stopped playing and you've mopped up most of the enemies, so more often than not, you're just sitting there twiddling your thumbs waiting for the meteor to move so you can get back to the fun part. And that leads me into the crucial flaw of this map. It's boring as sin. The challenge doesn't even begin to kick in until roughly halfway through the map, which is about 25 to 30 minutes of playtime, I might add, depending on how long you dick around with search boxes. So, overall, Point of Contact is about what you'd expect. It's very basic and lacks the depth of its successors, but does that mean it's bad? Personally, I'd say no. It's what an on-disc map should be. It's a simple, effective introduction that doesn't require looking up a bunch of guides to make it through, like some other on-disc maps. However, for veteran players like myself, going back to this map was an exercise in tedium. After Point of Contact, Nightfall needed to innovate and shake things up for anyone to look twice at it. And it did. But no one cared because it wasn't zombie. But honestly, Nightfall was a massive step forward for the season and set the bar very high. How so? Well, let's get into it. From the beginning, Nightfall establishes that it's going to be bigger, better, and have more going on than its predecessor. Here's a fun game. Take a shot every time I say predecessor in my videos. You'll maybe make it through 2 of them before succumbing to alcohol poisoning like my kids probably will, when they realize how terrible of a father I was to them. But back on topic. The introduction of the breeder immediately sets the precedent for how over the top and crazy this one is going to be. Another thing the map course corrects very quickly is the difficulty and pacing. Whereas Point of Contact took longer to get to the fucking point than The Dark Knight Rises, Nightfall strikes a masterful balance of difficulty and action. It's easy for just long enough for the player to get set up so that when the difficulty does kick in, it feels like you still have a fighting chance if you play your cards right. Another area this map improves over Point of Contact is in its change-up rounds. The crippling boredom of the barrier hives have instead been replaced with the breeder. And luckily for us, this is a pretty solid boss. Well, at least the final fight. The early game fight is nothing more than amusing, albeit brief diversions in gameplay. As for the final fight, it's significantly improved. Unlike the first fight, there's a constant feeling that you're actually hurting this thing. There's also a nice sense of escalation to the fight. It starts out much like the first fight, but as it goes on, the breeder gets seemingly more aggressive and will attempt to heal itself. In terms of actual difficulty, however, it's disappointingly easy. Then again, that could just be because I've played this map approximately 84 million times. Yet more areas this map improves from Point of Contact is in the story. Like I mentioned earlier, there's actual characters this time around, an actual story as well, and collectible mini cutscenes in the form of intel. There are admittedly a bit of exposition dumps at times, but nevertheless they serve as an effective way to bolster the richness of the story.
Trash all over the ring, and then I start eating garbage. And then I pick up the trash can, and I bash the guy on the head.
And lastly, the Venom X. Holy God, this weapon is wonderful. It's a noob tube, and it has an airburst function? God is real, and we are not worthy. Okay, as much as this map improves, there are a few things I'm not a huge fan of. Actually, there's only one thing I don't really like. Remember how I praised how good the balancing of the map was? Well, there is 1 or 2 points where it potentially can get a bit unfair. These fucking crates. They'll throw a random cryptid type at you at a certain point in a hive. These can include a hunter, a phantom, a cluster of scorpions, or even a goddamn rhino, which becomes even more problematic if you just so happen to be working on a hive that is scripted to always spawn a rhino in about halfway through, so now you can possibly have 2 rhinos at once and maybe a phantom for good measure. Jesus Christ. Now, this is a very fringe circumstance, but I figured it'd only be fair to point it out as it is a bit of a blemish on the overall fantastic map balancing. Oh, and the turret placements. Dear fucking God, the turret placements are nearly useless. What is this even doing out here? Overall, Nightfall represents a more confident Extinction experience, and to this day, still my favorite of the saga. It learned from the mistakes of its predecessor, and set the stage for a more complex DLC season. Mayday released to surprising community praise, with many calling it their favorite to this day. But does it deserve that title? Well, yes and no, because opinions by their very nature cannot be right or wrong, but I digress. Let's discuss Mayday. Picking up where Nightfall left off, Mayday builds on the successes of Nightfall by keeping things that worked and adding on to it. It keeps the difficulty and nails the pacing, while adding its own unique spin on the formula with player choice side paths filled with bonus items, and adding a rather ingenious crafting system that far exceeds the one found in Zombies. It also helps that each craftable item is unique and actually helpful to the player, unlike the garbage found in Transit or Die Rise. Whether it's a portable Tesla trap or the ever popular sticky flares, they're always worth your time to pick up, and each one will complement a certain playstyle. While Mayday doesn't have its own unique wonder weapon, it instead decides to build on the popularity of the Venom X and adds 3 new craftable variants, the LX, FX, and SX. The LX and FX are sadly little more than palette swap Venom X's, but the SX is a wildly different weapon. When fired, it'll create friendly plant turrets that cannot be destroyed by enemies and instead last on a timer. They're like really disgusting sentry guns. I mean, they're nowhere near as powerful as those things, but with just the right placement, a smart player can use them to great effect. Moving on to the story aspects, we get a shit ton of it this time around. We get multiple audio logs from Archer and a micro-series about Dr. Kesar and Samantha Cross's interactions. Archer's intel files show that he knows exactly where the cryptids are hiding, and that after researching the after-action reports from Colorado, Archer has ruined the word Colorado for me. Now it's always Colorado and I want to fucking kill myself. So thanks for that. He notices that there is coordination and communication, which eventually leads him to the conclusion that there must be something controlling them and that they aren't merely acting on animal instinct as previously speculated. I also really appreciated his comparison of the cryptids to Spanish stallions. That was a nice touch. The Kesar files. These are a wonderful little addition to Mayday, as they detail Cross's slow descent into madness and show what exactly happened on the ship prior to the SIF team's arrival. Unfortunately, they also showcase just how remarkably inconsistent Ali Hillis's performance is.
Believe me, Doc, it is anything but safe.
Half the time, she cannot inflect properly, and it's driving me crazy. Okay, what else has she done? Oh, that explains a lot. Despite the clear amount of solid innovation, Mayday is lacking in one very key area, the Kraken fight.
What's up, everybody? It's Omar.
This fight is among the worst of the boss fights in Call of Duty history. Honestly, I'd put it about right there with Tree Takio from Zetsubo. While it's certainly more grand than the Breeder, it also misses what made that fight good. There's no sense of escalation, it drags on forever, and perhaps even more importantly, there's no sense of feedback when you fire on the Kraken. It just feels like it dies out of nowhere. Unlike the point of contact escape sequence, however, I really don't think there's a simple fix for this. This is just a fundamentally flawed fight that would need to be redesigned from the ground up to fully take advantage of the awesome potential on display. In conclusion, Mayday, like Nightfall, is a confident and innovative step forward for Extinction. With the new optional side paths, a simple yet effective crafting system, and new variants of the Venom X, this one easily would have been my favorite of the series had it not been for that horrendous Kraken fight that actually damages the overall experience. Set thousands of feet below the surface in Ball's Pyramid, Awakening immediately sets itself apart from the grander reality of the previous 3 endeavors, and has us battling the cryptids on their home turf, in undoubtedly the most visually stunning locale of the entire game. Especially the main volumetric coming off the Ark. It looks so good. Like Nightfall and Mayday, the map features new enemy types in the form of the Mammoth, the Bomber, and the Gargoyle. All of these enemies are solid additions to the cryptid variety and help spice up the game. In addition to the new enemies, the map features a slightly revamped version of Mayday's side areas in the form of these little nooks and crannies filled with goodies. However, the price of admission is much higher than in Mayday, as this is where the player will have to fight quite possibly the most dangerous enemy in the game, the Mammoth. These things hit like a fucking tank, call in reinforcements, and can burrow underground to hide from you. But the loot you get from beating them is well worth it. Buildable schematics, the new Arc attachment, and weapon lockers. And the best part is, 3 of these areas are accessible from the moment you step foot into the first area, so it allows a player to take a gamble to get a bit of a head start if they so choose to. And you can jump higher in this one. I couldn't find a place to fit that in, but I really like this element. It helps contribute to the feeling that you're actually in an alien environment. Remember earlier in the video when I said that the whole run through the map while you fight cryptids idea was done so much better in Awakening? Well, I wasn't lying. This escape sequence is one of the best parts of the entire series. It's fast, frenetic, and gets the adrenaline pumping in a way no other map has been able to do. Also, it actually has a music track that plays throughout the whole sequence. yeah, that part helps a little bit. And lastly, the story of Awakening. Like the 2 maps before it, it's strong and features a few interesting twists and turns, such as the true extent of Dr. Cross's telekinetic powers, and the new character dynamic between Archer and Cross. The latter is surprisingly effective and is literally the only time in the entire series I found myself interested in the characters themselves. Oh yeah, and also you kill Archer. I kinda saw that coming. Like, I remember when I saw the reveal trailer, I said, when he gets hit by Cross, that's totally a fake out and they're just gonna kill him later in the map. I was right, but sadly, for all the things Awakening does right, it does falter in quite a few areas. For starters, can these fucking cutscenes just cohere properly? Archer was in the hibernation chamber at the end of Mayday, and now he's nowhere near it and loses the army ad in the outro. Why do I even fucking bother? The weapon selection has been mixed up from the previous 2 maps, and unfortunately, I do not like a lot of these. The Amelie is a less satisfying LSAT, and the TAC-12 is nearly worthless, even with all the upgrades you could possibly get. And despite me actually liking the idea and design of the gargoyle, its implementation is laughably bad. They constantly clip through the map and oftentimes get stuck in walls with the ability to fire on you with impunity. What's worse is the fact that after the first area, when you kill one, the game is scripted to immediately spawn in a phantom. This gives you very little time to breathe, and instead of coming off as, fast and intense, it just results in everyone becoming annoyed. Speaking of annoyances, the new challenges added to Awakening are eye-rollingly dumb at best and absolutely infuriating at worst. Okay, there's one challenge where every player has to purchase a new weapon before the obelisk is scanned, which in itself isn't too bad. But then there's challenges like kill 25 cryptids while every player is prone, or kill 10 cryptids with traps in the final area that has one poorly placed fire trap.
Oh my god!
The Cortex Charge-Up. This segment is much like the Kraken. It's boring, obnoxious, and overstays its welcome by being the exact same fucking thing for about 25 minutes. That's a bit of hyperbole, it's not actually 25 minutes, but just let me have this. And lastly, the Vanguard sections. Do I even need to say anything about this? So overall, while it features some new elements such as arc attachments and interesting new cryptid types, Awakening is a surprising step back in the Extinction saga. Its weapon selection is rather poor, it offers little meaningful innovation, unlike Mayday and Nightfall, and the map is borderline unfair and obnoxious at times. Huh. I remember I had similar problems with the last DLC 3 we covered. What is it with DLC 3 constantly producing the worst of its respective season? After Awakening, which set in motion an epic finale to save the world, Exodus was faced with the daunting task of making good on that potential. And it did. Mostly. Starting from the top, Exodus is the first of the Extinction maps where the journey is non-linear. Sure, it all ultimately ends up with you defending the Medusa device after fucking around with some generators, but this divergence in formula is a respectable one. Exodus allows you to progress through the main 4 areas of the map in any way you choose. However, each area requires you to open a door and engage in the newly added street fight mechanics that essentially function as shorter generators but without the burden of defending something. Funny enough, the doors and generators have their own difficulty stacking. So if you think, yeah, I can just do all these easy doors for bonus skill points, then you've got another thing coming, friend. Especially that final door. It's absolutely brutal and is best left ignored until the end, if you do it at all. But because of this change in formula, the pacing feels a little bit less focused than usual, and it doesn't entirely work. But like I said before, it is a respectable change-up. Another thing that was crucial for this map to nail was the ancestors. They've been built up since Mayday, so they better be worth the wait. And they are. They're genuinely intimidating additions that, unlike Brutus, or Amargua, or the Kraken, actually make you go, oh fuck, we're in for a fight, boyos. However, due to their immense power, they can result in some very unfair failures and deaths. Especially that grab attack. That's a bit much. And lastly, the map introduces a new wonder weapon, the NX-1 Disruptor. This weapon actually fits in-universe and is satisfying to use. I'm still not a fan of the fact though that they completely ditched the Venom X in favor of this, but what can you do? On the story side of things, Exodus is perhaps the strongest of the saga. Exodus takes place 3 months after the Awakening and shows that most of the world has been overrun by cryptids under the guidance of over 200 ancestor warlords worldwide. What remains in the United States knows there's no saving our home, and instead focus their last remaining efforts on finding sanctuary in the only place out of reach of the ancestors, the Exodus space station. Sounds like a great setup to a satisfying ending, right? Well, let's talk about the ending real quick. A lot of people don't like this ending, but I personally love it. After a chill-inducing final order from Godfather and the subsequent Ancestor assault, Civ Team detonates the Medusa device, allowing the Exodus shuttle to safely make it to the station as Cross succumbs to the influence of the Ancestors and prepares to wipe out the last remnants of humanity. Now, the ending is intentionally vague-ish and isn't 100% set in stone, but come on. Cross totally killed everyone. And I love that. Humanity loses. Despite all of our efforts, we really were just, in the words of Archer,
we're all just puppets, dancing on the ancestors' strings.
Now, of course, the power of this ending can change if they decide to canonically tie Extinction into IW zombies like a lot of us are expecting. Infinity Ward, I beg of you, let your zombies mode be its own little thing so that it doesn't actively damage things I actually like. Just let it fade away into obscurity where it belongs.
This is so savage, I just feel terrible. Like, some of these are so bad that I can't even come back with good roasts. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just genuinely feel sorry. It's not even funny anymore.
In terms of negatives, Exodus doesn't really have that many. Sure, there's not that many intel files this time around, and a surprising amount of the geometry is just copy-pasted from campaign. But the biggest problem I have with it is, like Awakening, its unfair difficulty spikes. But that's really the only thing I actively dislike about the map. So, in conclusion, despite the relative disappointment of Awakening and a few missteps of its own, Exodus manages to hit a solid triple and satisfyingly conclude the saga with an innovative, replayable, and intense experience. And with that, we draw to the end of Extinction. So before I give my overall final thoughts, let's rank the maps. Number 1, Nightfall. Easily the best of the season. It may not be as strong as the best parts of Mayday, but there's nothing really bad in this one per se, and that consistency is more than enough for it to grab my number 1 spot. Number 2, Mayday. A genuinely wonderful map filled with innovation and a plethora of story that sadly fumbles in the end with an abysmally designed boss fight. Number 3, Exodus. The biggest and boldest of the series, Exodus manages to conclude the franchise with a satisfying outing that takes some risks, even if all of them don't work as well as I'd like. Number 4, Awakening. While it's undoubtedly the most visually beautiful of all the maps, and features one of the best moments in the entire series with the escape sequence, its removal of a few features, barrier hive-esque vanguard sections, and a horrifically implemented new enemy type, the overall experience suffers. Number 5, Point of Contact. Easily the worst of the series. No question about it. Sure, it serves its purpose as a solid little introduction map, but that doesn't mean I have to like it. So, overall, Extinction is not perfect. Point of Contact is a substantially weaker experience, the characters are rather simple, there's some cryptid balancing issues in the later maps, and a lot of continuity errors in the cutscenes. But honestly, this isn't enough to overshadow the litany of things this game does right. The innovative and addictive gameplay, the well thought out mythology, the constant post-launch updates, and of course, the story itself is solid. Extinction is my second favorite co-op experience in Call of Duty history, even above Black Ops 1, but far below Black Ops 3. And here's why. Black Ops 1 may have been fun and inventive, but it was held back from true greatness by its inconsistent and scattershot story with simplistic characters. Now moving on to Extinction and Black Ops 3. I will never compare the gameplay of these two, as they're completely different things, and it's not a fair comparison to draw because it ultimately comes down to personal preference. Do you prefer infinite wave-based survival, or do you prefer something with an ending? But what I will compare is story and character work. Starting with the characters. Extinction is more akin to an above-average summer action escapism film, whereas Black Ops 3 takes a page out of the book of more introspective character studies like Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy and Logan. Allow me to explain. Extinction decides to focus on its massive scale and, in the third act, world-ending stakes, whereas Black Ops 3 focused on its nuanced characters and emotionally satisfying moments. And that's why Extinction, despite all its innovation and the very satisfying third act, pales in comparison to Black Ops 3. However, in terms of a cohesive and well-put-together narrative, it easily exceeds Black Ops 3 since it wasn't weighed down by the trappings of a patchwork narrative. Long story short, I personally think the story isn't nearly as important as the characters that inhabit it. And don't even try telling me, hey, characters and story don't matter. The only thing that matters is gameplay, Rizzo. That is a lazy way of deflecting legitimate criticism. They do matter and can make the difference between something good and something great. So with how good Extinction is, you kind of have to wonder, what the hell happened with IW Zombies? It completely lacks the soul and innovation of the team's previous effort. I'm only disappointed in you because I know you can do so much better. I'm like a dad now. Well, those are my thoughts on Extinction. Like with my Black Ops 3 review, I left out some of the little things because, again, we'd be here for days if I devoted time to every single little thing. But I digress. What did you think of Extinction? Did you think it was an underrated little gem like me? Or did you quit before Mayday like Milo? Don't worry, Milo. I still love you. Tell me what you think down below. Anyway, thanks for watching, and have a great day.